So you grew up in South Florida. I mean, this one's personal for you.
This one's personal for me. I mean, ever since I was a kid, I grew up in South Florida in Boca Raton. Don Soffer was an icon, a legend, an entrepreneurial legend in my view. And, you know, most people we've talked about had posters on the wall of Michael Jordan or some celebrity. I would have had posters on my wall of Don Soffer. He bought 800 acres of swampland in South Florida in the 60s and developed it into what would become Aventura, Florida. In fact, Aventura is named after the Spanish word for adventure. And it was an adventure. He had all these roadblocks, and somehow he was able to cultivate these 800 acres of swampland into one of the most successful projects and communities in the entire country.
It's an amazing story of overcoming obstacles. Don Soffer built over $7 billion of real estate in America. And there were three big takeaways from this interview. One, he is right on trend, capturing the post-war trends. And he talks about how he saw them. Second is, I mean, he invented influencer marketing, basically. And then the third thing is he has this amazing ability to recontextualize risk.
Yeah.
Right, he's doing these seemingly impossible, complex projects. This is a phenomenal interview.
And he breaks it down. I mean, this is a guy who's so in the weeds of his business. He explains the details of how to blast dynamite. He explains how do you drudge 800 acres of land. He is so in the weeds of his business. He knows every detail of what he does. And most importantly, he also talks about success. And we ask him, what has been the key to your success? And when you hear it, you're like, wow, that's so simple. But it's been massively helpful to him, and I think it'll be massively helpful to everyone watching. He is a legend. Ladies and gentlemen, Don Soffer.
Started from the bottom, now the whole team here. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now my whole team in. Started from the bottom, now we here. Started from the bottom, now the whole team here. I done kept it real from the jump.
My father was born in America, and he had a terrible accident when he was 5 years old. He had his right eye kicked out by a mule. And he had a glass eye. What happened was I came home drunk one night, and he would leave his glass eye on the bathroom sink. And I was drunk. I just wanted a glass of water, and I drank it, and I swallowed the eye.
Oh, my God.
So then the next day, I had to go to the doctor for a colostomy exam. And the doctor started yelling, and he said, "There's somebody looking back at me."
It's good.
It's a great story.
I bet you never did that again.
Oh, no. And it took me, I had to poop for 4 days before we found it.
I want to shift a little bit to South Florida and buying 700 acres where we sit right now in Aventura.
800.
800 acres, excuse me, 800 acres, where we sit right now in your beautiful offices in Aventura. Before I get there, I want to ask something that I'm curious about, which is, when you began to work with your dad and build these malls, was that something, were you passionate about real estate? Or was it more of a, here's an opportunity, I'm going to solve the problem? How did you think about passion?
It was more of earning a living and having a successful economic job.
So that was your priority?
Yeah, I wasn't interested in making a name for myself or being interviewed by three guys in black. Why are you in black?
we wear this every day. I rang the bell at the New York Stock Exchange in a black T-shirt.
You ran today?
I rang the bell when I took our company public, the New York Stock Exchange.
Your company public?
Yes. And I wore a black T-shirt when I rang the bell. So that's how...
Is that black significant?
No, it's just our uniform.
I also rang the bell at the Stock Exchange, but I wore a nice...
He wore a suit.
Are you two partners?
No, different. We both took our companies public, separate companies.
Yeah.
And we met that year.
What exchange are you on?
I'm on the New York Stock Exchange, and he's on NASDAQ.
You're on the New York Stock Exchange?
Yeah.
You're on NASDAQ?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Well, you know, I have a company, too, that's public. It's a stem cell company with the University of Miami.
You made a major donation.
Yeah, I actually...
You made a major donation to the Miami stem cell
$25 million donation. Yeah. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
But Don, let's go back to what Harley was talking about, where you take swampland in Florida, 800 acres. You're already successful. You've been building malls in Pittsburgh and doing very well with it. Yeah. And you decide to take this big shot on some swampland in Florida.
Yeah.
Why?
I wasn't the smartest guy in school, but I had a good intuition of what's going to happen. I knew that people, because I experienced it. I lived in Pittsburgh, and I knew that any time I got a chance, I'd want to go to Florida because I could play golf. I'd go boating. I'd go swimming. I could do all those things you couldn't do in Pittsburgh in the wintertime.
Okay.
So I thought that would be a good opportunity. So, but let me tell you what happened.
Yeah.
So when I went to get the permit to dredge, because I had to move 8 million yards of rock to sand to create the land.
So just to set the stage here, you buy 800 acres of land right here in Aventura, which I believe you named it because it's adventure, and you thought it'd be an amazing adventure. Did I get that right? That's why it's called Aventura?
They're called Aventura, yeah. It's adventure in Spanish.
That's right. So yeah, so it was Aventura translates to adventure in Spanish. You thought this would be a great adventure, but you buy 800 acres here, and it's swampland.
Yeah, half the land's underwater.
So it's underwater.
Yeah.
Who buys 800 acres of swampland? Like, I mean, that is an adventure. Some would say that's a nightmare.
Well,
right.
no.
I don't know what the Spanish term for nightmare is,
that's
but
the proverbial story that if you go to Florida, you got to swampland.
exactly. That's right. Yeah. If you're gullible, I got some swampland for you.
Yeah.
That's right. So you decide to buy it. Why? I mean, obviously, I get why Florida.
Because I know the question is, I didn't know all the problems I would run into. I didn't know because I thought it'd be because all of Miami was dredged. You know, you go to Miami Beach, that's all dredged. Mm-hmm. You know, all the land there is all created. So I thought it'd be pretty easy to get the permit to dredge and so forth. I went to the environmental agency. He was headed by a guy by the name of Nathaniel Reed.
Okay.
He was if you were ever to do a movie and you wanted a guy, an environmentalist, to play, he was the guy. He's the one you get. So I went to him and he says, "You're not touching that land. That's the land where the fish grow. They hide in the mangroves until they're old enough to protect themselves in the open. And you're not touching it."
This is after you bought it?
Yeah.
So you buy the land, you want to turn it in, you want to raise it, you want to dredge it, and the environmental, regulatory body says, no way.
Right.
Wow. How do you feel in this moment? You must be devastated.
What would you do?
I would be devastated. I'd figure it out because I'm an entrepreneur, but I'd be pretty upset.
How did you figure it out?
I had a friend that worked for the governor. So I told his name was Dooley, and I said, "Dooley, can you get me 5 minutes with the governor?" And he says, "Don, I don't know if I can do that." So he says, "But a good time to come up when we know he's in Tallahassee is when the legislature is in session,
right,
and we know he'll be there, and maybe I can get you 5 minutes." So, luck be it, he came out, I had a model. In my other office, there's a picture of the model, and of the land before and after. And he showed it to me. He said, "What is this?" And I said, "Well, this is a model of the project I want to build." He said, "Well, what's the big deal?" I said, "Well, it'll employ 4,000 people, and it'll cost about $100 million, and it would be your concept, your idea, Governor." He said, "My idea? Yeah, you'll have 100,000 people that would be going there every day." And he says, "Really, my idea?" I said, "Yes, Governor, you're right. Your whole concept is your idea." "Really?" So next thing I know, so and by chance, I had chartered a jet, which was back in '67, which was unheard of.
Yeah, no one was flying private.
Yeah,
then.
nobody was flying. So I had a Lear, and then I offered them because the state had a King Air or something like that, a prop plane.
Yeah.
So I offered him a ride to Miami. He took it. I didn't have any trouble getting it.
Wow. So let me just sort of make sure we understand, because this is a fascinating story. So you buy 800 acres right here where we're sitting in what is now Aventura, which is swampland. The environmental agency says, no way, you can't touch it. You then find yourself in Tallahassee during the state legislature when they're sitting. You meet the governor of Florida. The governor of Florida, you convince him that it's his idea, not your idea, which is brilliant.
He's going to get all the credit.
You play on
that was the key.
Yeah, you play on his ego and his legacy.
Well, he was a politician.
That's right, and politicians want to have.
If he could put a flower in his lapel.
Yeah, exactly.
That he would.
And he built this, and 4,000 people would be employed, 100,000 people would be there, and you take him on a ride in your private jet, which at the time is unheard of. You bring him back to Miami, and you show him the project, and he says, let's go. How did it all happen after that?
Well, I designed the, I had Robert Trent Jones, because I know names are important. That's why after Turnberry was established, there was a lot of celebrities. I would treat celebrities as celebrities. I would give them free rooms, free food, and they would mingle with the people, and everybody would say, geez, I saw James Caan there, I saw this. I said, well, you know, he ended up buying an apartment.
Wow.
So it was a good happening, and I had a lot of fun, a lot of beautiful women. My wife, sitting over there, it's the first time I ever heard her not say anything or not interrupt me.
You're doing a good job, so yeah. We're carrying it, I hope.
Okay.
Don,
What?
It's you were very much.
Well, she's going to yell at me when this meeting is over. Why did you say this?
Well, the good news is you get to edit it all, and she'll get to edit it.
You were very much ahead of your time in your marketing. Today, we would call what you did influencer marketing.
Yeah.
Back then, you took your residents and made them your best salespeople. How did you convince these people to help sell your real estate? People like Madonna and Elton John and famous people.
Yeah. Well, because as I said, I would take care of them. You know, you have a celebrity, and he wants a table. We'd have tables available because the place was very popular, and a lot of people would go there and enjoy, a lot of celebrities, and almost every celebrity around would either have dinner there or be staying there. Elton John was there all the time, and Bill Cosby was there. And,
it was the place to be.
Yeah, and then you go, people would love, you know, people would go there, oh, look, there's James Caan. Oh, look, there's, you know.
And guests would be attracted. They would want to be where the celebrities spend their time.
They want to meet them and get their autograph.
That's right, yeah.
When did you know Turnberry was going to work?
Well, I didn't know. I just rationale and figured out, because the first celebrities that came, I took care of them. I gave them free rooms, even though they were low-end celebrities. They were comedians and so forth. And then I made them feel comfortable, and I made them feel like VIPs. And they told their friends. Some of them were much higher than they were, and it just worked out that way.
So, 1967, you moved to South Florida. You buy 800 acres underwater land. You dredge it. You turn this into this incredible piece of land to develop. You create the Aventura Country Club, which would become Turnberry. Right. And then 1983 rolls around. The year I was born, actually, 1983.
You were born in 83?
Born in 83, that's right.
You were born in 83?
I was born in 83, that's right, yes, I was. So 83, I was born. And I say this because growing up for me, I used to come to Aventura Mall, and it was unbelievable.
Oh, you lived up here?
I lived in Boca.
Oh.
I lived in Boca Raton. And I used to come to Aventura Mall when I was a kid in the 90s. And it was unbelievable. The lights, the stores, the energy, the parking lot was always full. Can you explain how this whole, because in my view, I'm in retail now, my company, we're a retail business, a commerce company. I think a lot about retail. And it seems to me that one of the most successful retail concepts that's ever been created in America, but maybe in the world, is Aventura Mall. It's iconic. How did that happen?
Again, it's common sense. You know, if you're going to build a mall, you have to put in the kind of stores that the people in the area want.
So you've gone from Bloomingdale's to Prada.
Yeah.
Talk about that evolution.
Well, Bloomingdale's was a real coup because Bloomingdale's was a big, popular store in New York. So to get them down here was a big coup.
How did that happen?
Well, because the center became hot, the others, they realized if Gucci was here, and they were all doing well because that got out, that they would probably do well there. And it's true they did, because a lot of the stores that are in Aventura Mall are at other, like Bal Harbor or my son-in-law's place, the Design District.
Yeah.
And, you know.
It's amazing.
But we've always out business them.
Don, I read a quote that you gave from your football days. You talk about the importance of team and hard work, and that nothing in life comes easy. You've spent your career building incredibly complex projects. There must have been moments where you thought things weren't going to work out. Talk to us about some of the most difficult moments you've had in business.
Well, was to get her to marry me.
That was the real coup.
That was a real coup. So like,
that's sweet. Middle of the business podcast, he's shouting at his wife. That's
you can see why.
I can see why. Of course, that's right.
For her to marry an old guy like me, it's a major accomplishment.
Although you have a very young spirit to you. Your spirit is so young. You have energy. Tell us about those the times where it was hard. I mean, talk about like even this Aventura project. Were there moments where you said this whole thing is going to fall apart?
Right.
No.
Why?
I never said that because I was always the guy that when I fell into a pile of horse shit, I would say there's got to be a pony in here somewhere. So I always had that attitude, and there's a way to work it out, make it work, because I wouldn't go into a project unless I saw it had potential. A lot of things that developers do that are standard, and they copy other developers, but I didn't want to go that route.
You think about, your legacy, what you've built. I assume Aventura is a big part of that legacy.
Yeah, right.
I mean, we're literally sitting here right now. When you look back on it, did you ever expect it would become this place that combines residential, retail, office, entertainment?
I built it, of course. I know when I built the country club first, because I know that was something that would bring the people. I was doing everything that I wanted to do, and I wanted to make the place an accommodation for people with all kinds of interests, because I had those interests.
Yeah.
I had a boat. I was a 6 handicap in golf, and I did all those things, and I just enjoyed myself. I had a lot of celebrity friends, a lot of beautiful women that would hang out there, and I knew that a lot of my friends married. They came up there, and they met girls at the bar, and I bet you I had 10 friends that married girls.
People that they met
at the bar, yeah.
Unbelievable.
So it was successful that way, but for me, it was just common sense.
Yeah. You
keep saying that,
yeah,
Don.
common
you keep
sense.
saying the word common sense in the interview to describe major accomplishments. What does common sense mean to you?
Well, common sense means, it's just like I said, okay, the problem is, all right, I got this project here. How do I make it work? Okay, I got to bring the people in. Well, what's going to bring the people in? I want them to buy apartments. Well, what's going to make them buy an apartment? Well, you're going to create an activity point if they're going to buy an apartment. They got to enjoy if they have a boat, it's boating. We have a marina. If they have they like golf, they like tennis. I had the Fred Stolley, top professional tennis player. I had Julius Boros, a top golfer, won the U.S. Open twice. And all these names brought the people, and they all wanted to live there because they could play on the golf course with Julius or see him in the pro. And it's just like everybody's, for want of a better word, a starfucker.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, no, I mean, they also want to be around other interesting people. And so you've created sort of these magnets.
You made a vibe.
Yeah,
and
you created a
Julius
vibe.
was and so was Fred. And then all the tennis players lived there.
Yeah.
Jimmy Connors lived there. Venus Gerolaitis lived there. John McEnroe lived there too.
Your mother lived there too, no? Your mother lived there too.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about talking about your mother. Obviously, I think your mother passed away in 2006.
Yeah.
So she was able to see your incredible success. But your father had passed away about 30 years before that.
Oh yeah, he died. He was 62 when he died. He took a stroke in Las Vegas because he was a degenerate gambler. I mean, he wasn't, and he spent 6 weeks in a hospital in Las Vegas, and then he came home, and then a year or two later, he died. Wow. But he was out of it, when he had the stroke. His mind wasn't there. Anyway.
David and I did a lot of research on your upbringing.
But he got a lot of, as I have to say, he got a lot of my intuition and, again, common sense from him, because the same things in his own way when he built the flaky supermarket, that was something that was innovative at that time, because the people now had cars and they would come to the supermarket because he would have specials and so forth. They'd load up the trunk of their car and drive back out to the super or get free parking. But because the city was charging them or towing them, to park there. And that's...
he had the same common sense thoughtfulness that you did.
Really,
and it sounds like you got a lot of that.
That's where I really got it from, my father.
What would your father have thought about all the success you've had since
My father was like, this is him. So we were at a party one time. So he found out that I bought an airplane. So he started yelling at me, "You dumb son of a bitch, that thing will break you. You don't have, where the hell do you get that kind of money?" So it was $60,000 for a brand new Cessna 310.
Beautiful.
So then I walked away, and then I heard him say, "My son flies an airplane."
He was proud of you.
That's right.
So, but he didn't want to let me know. He would just.
But he wanted everyone else to know.
Yeah.
I love that.
Your uncle was also in real estate, wasn't he?
Yeah, but he used to follow my dad's thing. My dad and my uncle were not good friends.
Family businesses, my family was in a clothing business. They can be very difficult. You've been in family businesses your whole life.
Yeah.
What's it like running a family business or being in a family
Terrible.
business? Yeah. Why? Terrible.
Well, because they always, I went into one business, the last business, was, well, first of all, when my father broke up with my dad, I was running one shopping center, and then I was helping him with another shopping center, my dad. One day in the morning, my Uncle Joe would tell me all the bad things about my dad, And then in the afternoon, when I go to work with my dad, he'd tell me all the bad things about Uncle Joe. I mean, it was like and then my dad had this family, Lebowitz family, so when I did Southfield Village, so I said, well, Dad, we have to make them part. You were a partner before. You cannot, you know. And that was a big mistake, but I'm sure it was the other way around.
But you've made family business work now, even with your kids, with your children. I mean, you brought your children into the business as well, and it's
yeah. Well, I did a thing recently, not recently, about 10 years ago, called a grat. You know what that is?
Mm-mm.
A grat is something that you can give your kids property at a young age, at any time, and then they would avoid paying the inheritance tax. They'd pay it at an early age before the property's mature or anything like that. And that's what I did. So I gave the kids all that, and now I'm, you know, they have all the money.
And you're retired.
Yeah. Were you able to fully retire without staying in the business at all?
I didn't formally retire.
No.
I still have an office. I'm still the managing partner of the mall. And
You're still managing partner of Aventura Mall.
Yeah.
Wow.
That was one thing that and you know, that's what I did, but I really am not too active in that. I mean, my daughter runs it, and there's a lot of things that I would have done differently, but that's...
It's hers to run.
Is that really your baby, Aventura Mall? Of all the projects you've done?
Right now, yeah, because I'm not in Pittsburgh anymore.
What is it about Aventura Mall for you that's so special?
Well, it's one of the most successful malls in the world, and I'm very proud of it. And I like walking through it, and...
What do you feel when you walk through Aventura Mall?
Well, I say this would be a good place for my wife to shop.
That's good. That's good.
That's probably why it works.
Yeah. I want to ask a little bit more about sort of this idea of entrepreneurship and your story of being this great entrepreneur. You know, this show is a celebration of Jewish entrepreneurship, and it strikes David and I, as younger Jewish entrepreneurs, that there's something about the Jewish culture that works very well with business and entrepreneurship.
Well, I think it's innate that the Jewish younger people realize that one of the best ways to fight anti-Semitism is to accomplish. And whether it's in athletics, or whether it's in physics, or whether it's in medicine. In other words, if you take, or take Bloomberg, or take any of the very successful entrepreneurs that are Jewish, and you'll find a lot of them have that been instilled that people are going to respect me now, the wealthy.
Yeah.
And that's the truth.
Do you think that will continue? I mean, as you think about, you know, there's going to be a lot of people watching.
There's a lot of things. I guess you heard the story on Columbia University,
sure,
where they Trump cut off $4 million.
400 million.
400 million, yeah.
But do you think anti-Semitism continues? Like, where do you think this goes?
Well, I think in time it should go away because first of all, it's difficult because the Jews are a very small percentage of the population.
15 million people on the planet, tiny. There's 7 million Jews in America.
Yeah, well.
Tiny percentage, but yet the impact is so remarkable. It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, because they're very driven because of anti-Semitism. It's bad news and good news.
Interesting. So you're saying actually that part of the success of the Jewish people is because, frankly, a lot of people hate us, and that drives us to be more ambitious.
That's exactly right.
Wow.
So the question is because if you're Jewish, you're nobody. But then if you're the owner of the mall or if the owner of the bank, you're somebody.
Yeah. That's right. You know, we sat down in Los Angeles a couple weeks ago with a guy named Michael Milken. You may know Mike Milken.
I know Mike, yeah.
Great guy. And Mike actually told us that if you look at the heads of every Hollywood studio, the founders of the studios, from Universal to MGM, all of them, they all grew up within 200 kilometers of Warsaw. Every founder of every major Hollywood studio grew up within 200 kilometers of Warsaw in Poland.
Yeah. I remember I was partners with, I was not partner, I was a good friend of Frank Sinatra. And he invited me to his house in Palm Springs for dinner. So I was flying out my plane, I ran into headwinds, and I got there late. You know, they eat dinner in Palm Springs at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Even Frank Sinatra.
So I get there, and he says, "Did you have dinner?" He says, "Where the hell you been?" So I said, "I ran into headwinds." He says, "Oh, okay, so did you have dinner?" And I says, "No, I haven't had dinner. I just got here." And he said, "Sit down at the bar. I'll make you dinner." So he went to the kitchen and made me pasta and whatever. And then we sat together till 5 in the morning, drinking.
Cool.
And he was telling me his whole life stories.
Wow.
And all the guys that were his boss were Jewish. Louis Mayer, you know, Goldwyn.
Right.
Yeah.
So almost all of Hollywood.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, having a story like, you know, I flew out to Palm Springs.
Right. To have dinner with Frank Sinatra.
And Frank Sinatra made me dinner.
Right.
And we sat there till 5 o'clock in the morning. What'd you guys drink till 5 o'clock in the morning?
Well, he drank Jack Daniels.
Okay.
I just drank vodka.
That's a lot of vodka and a lot of Jack Daniels till 5 o'clock in the morning.
He drank. But anyway, a lot of those stories
Amazing.
are bullshit, but a lot of them are true.
Yeah.
Don, this podcast celebrates Jewish entrepreneurship, and there's a lot of young Jewish entrepreneurs listening right now who want to be the next Don Soffer. What common sense would you want to impart to them?
Well, you find out, first of all, every kind of project or every kind of accomplishment is out there if you know what to look for. And if you see a successful situation or you see something that needs a little refurbishment or needs a little inspiration, then you should try to go for it and try to get it to work with your inspiration and common sense. So this is something that I would advise all young people to not worry about. When you get a problem situation, you should not worry about it because it's a feather in your cap to be in a position to solve it.
I love that.
It's great.
So
It strikes me that when you think about decisions you've made, you decide not to go play professional football. In 1962, you decide to build South Hills. 1967, you decide to buy 800 acres of land, swampland here in Aventura, as a quote-unquote adventure, and hence the name Aventura. 1983, you decide to build Aventura Mall. You've made some really big decisions that had very high risk. Where do you get the confidence from? Was that something your mother instilled in you? Did you, I mean, I know you're saying common sense, but you have to have a certain level of conviction to take these very large bets because, I mean, even buying an airplane when you were younger was a bet you made. It was a smart bet because it got you to places much more rapidly, much faster. But where'd you get the confidence to allow you to make such high conviction decisions?
I guess it was just my accumulation of knowledge of what made sense and what will work, because there was the underlying development idea that certain things and certain developers are very successful doing certain projects. So I decided to do one-upmanship, you know.
But Don, these are very complex projects.
Not if you digest them.
Okay, so talk to us about
what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, it's like you talk about a mall. Well, what do? You know, when you talk about how you lay it out, is it is this area worth going to 2 levels? Because I built a 1-level mall in Parkersburg, West Virginia, and I built one in Fort Myers. They were 1-level mall because the population there wasn't big enough for 2 levels.
Did you ever build a mall that didn't work?
No.
No? Even at first? They all worked right out of the gate?
One mall ended up failing. It was in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And that was quite creative how I made it.
Tell us.
Because my dad would find the property and he'd say, "Here, son, go develop it." I had to move 8 million cubic yards of rock, blasting rock. And so we decided a way to do that. We got a hold of a coal stripper and we bought one of his equipment. We bought him, and then we bought 2 955 bulldozers that were, they're 5-yard buckets, and we excavated that site. But we had one of the contractors, the coal stripper, we let him run and maintain the equipment. So one of the situations was where we blew the roof off of somebody's house, and then somebody else's house that lived near the property, we put a hole in their swimming pool. So the council for the city of Monroeville called me up and says, "You know, you're destroying all the homes in the immediate area, and we're going to have to shut you down." So I said, "Oh, don't do that. You know, that would be terrible." I said, "I promise you, we're not going to." So I took the key to the dynamite away from the excavator.
He almost cost you the whole project.
Yeah. So now I'm in the commission. I'm making this plea. It'll never happen again, I promise you, and so forth. And just then, a shot goes off, and the picture's on the wall.
Oh, my God.
The commissioner fell off the wall.
So while you're trying to convince the commissioner to let you keep blasting.
It'll never happen again. Well, I started laughing, and then they all started laughing too. It says, "Don, you can't do that. We got." So I said, I found the problem. I took the key away from the guy, and you have to when you shoot, you could, if you're going to use it for fill, you make small holes so that the rocks come out small. If you want to save money, you make bigger holes, and you got big rocks, but it's a lot of voids and so forth. It's not good fill.
It's a great example of being penny wise and pound foolish. Don, you had these projects. You kept saying about the 2-level mall in Pittsburgh, how it's still one of the most successful malls in America.
Absolutely, yeah.
Did you sell too early on some of these projects? Do you wish you had held on?
My partner, who was in Pittsburgh, he wanted to embellish himself with the insurance company. And I was a partner in building an office building in Pittsburgh. And he had an offer from them. I didn't want to sell it, but the deal that I had from him was he handles Pittsburgh, I'll handle Florida. So to get him out of my hair.
How do you think about when to sell and when not to sell?
Well, you have to look at what your own private situation is. If the property is in trouble or has a problem and it's not earning what it should, and then maybe the other guy, there's always reasons, and but I never really sold anything.
You've kept most of it.
Yeah, because I always felt that I could make it work for some reason or another, and as a result, the kids came out pretty.
Right? I mean, your guy thought he was saving you money, And in reality, he almost cost you the whole project.
He didn't give a shit. He just wanted to blow. He wanted to speed up the job.
Yeah.
Right. That's a
You know,
great story.
there is. I want to wrap up soon because I know, I want to be respectful of your time here, and we can talk for hours, so we can keep going. But I want to ask you about something specific, which is the value of your relationships. In particular, you talk about your relationship and friendship with.
Oh, she hasn't given me a price yet.
Okay, well, but you talk about your relationship with Frank. I mean, your business relationships, even friendships with people like Frank Sinatra or the commissioner, or how you went to go visit the governor of
Tony
Florida.
Bennett was a good friend of
Tony
mine.
Bennett.
Yeah.
You've had these.
What?
You've had these incredible relationships. Talk to us about one, how you cultivate it, but you got to tell us about Tony Bennett.
tell us
How'd
about
you
Tony
meet
Bennett.
Tony Bennett? What was that relationship like?
I met him in Aspen. We were playing tennis, and he became my best friend.
Wow. What was Tony Bennett like?
Nice guy, very Italian. He had a nice wife, and we had dinner. Well, she was with us
Wow.
in New York, and or lunch, and we passed.
Amazing.
You know, we had a cure for Alzheimer's in the stem cell thing, and I told his wife to ask the doctor because Tony had Alzheimer's, if the doctor would let Tony use the stem cells, and he said it's not FDA approved to know. Well, he ended up dying from it.
Wow.
That was unfortunate.
Yeah.
But Tony was a good friend and so forth.
But when you think about your relationships, particularly in business, again, going to Tallahassee to meet the governor of Florida to convince him to let you drudge, your relationships with, in the commissioner when you're blasting in Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh, you seem to have been able to cultivate incredibly strong business relationships to the extent that they've been very valuable for you. How do you cultivate, for those watching that want to cultivate better, deeper business relationships, what's been your secret?
It's just a personality. That's some things. It's like the president of the bank. I was the Bank of New York's largest borrower.
Okay.
And Howard Poduska, he was the chairman of the Bank of New York. And he would come down here, and we'd play golf together and hang out and so forth.
You developed those relationships.
Yeah, it was a great relationship.
But you also got on the plane when you had to. You'd go to Tallahassee when you had to. You'd go to Pittsburgh when you had to.
Yeah.
You made yourself.
No, the Tallahassee was before I even owned a plane. I chartered that plane because, private jets, just like you said.
No one did it.
They were just beginning.
Right. It's a real
big shot move. Yeah. I mean, you decide to charter a plane randomly to see this guy. I mean, most people would have gone to Tallahassee, but few would have thought to charter a plane, which ended up being such a big opportunity for you.
Because you flew him back.
I captured the governor. Captured him
for 90 minutes.
To fly back.
Yeah, but if you don't charter that plane, you probably don't get that time alone with him.
Well, why would I do that?
Yeah, smart. I mean, so that's what that's what we're saying. You describe a lot of this as common sense. It's actually, it's like Don's common sense.
What happened to your shoelaces?
I couldn't afford them. Spent it all on these cameras.
He's got shoelaces.
It's true.
He must be the senior partner.
Yeah, he's older than me too.
One day you'll get shoelaces.
Yeah. I want to close up soon, but I want to ask a couple things. This interview will hopefully live for many, many, many years, for decades or centuries. I mean, that's the beauty of a digital format. Many great-grandchildren and eventually many great-great-grandchildren will watch this interview today that we're doing right now. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be on the podcast apps. What do you want to say to future Soffer generations when they look back and they want to know about you?
The biggest thing, in order to quote Yogi Berra, when you come to a fork in the road, take it. In other words, you don't know where to go or what to do, you just go ahead. So when I came when I was turned down for the dredging here, I had to figure out a way. That was a monumental decision. And when I did the two-level mall in Pittsburgh, which is now still one of the most successful malls, I did that. Then I did the excavation where the initial price in Monroeville was $4 a yard, which would have made it impossible to build the center. I did it for 40 cents a yard.
Wow.
Because we got the coal stripper and we did all these. So these are all things that you put together.
It seems like that's part of what, that's part of your legacy, which is that you've encountered so many obstacles throughout all your careers, all of these different projects, and regardless of the obstacle,
you keep going.
You've always found a way. You've always give a guy a lake, fly to Tallahassee.
Take the fork in the road.
Take the fork in the road.
I'm going to give a graduation speech to the kids at my high school. And I'm going to tell them, whenever you have a problem, you got to think it out. And there's many, many ways to skin the proverbial cat. And they have to understand that they just can't put their hands in the air and give up, because all problems are to be solved.
It's great.
If there's someone watching now who wants to be the next Don, who wants to be this incredible developer and build incredible places like Aventura and everywhere else you've built, where would you be building today? Would you be building in South Florida? Would you be where would you build?
Before I'd be in Pittsburgh, yes, yeah.
You'd still build in South Florida? You believe in the future here?
Yeah, because I still think there's a lot of vacant land. When I came down here, Miami Beach was the hot place. Then it was Palm Beach. Yeah. Now it's Vero Beach and so forth. Fort Myers and so. There's a lot of. That's why I built the shopping center in Fort Myers.
That's right. We're going to close up. Maybe the last thing we'll ask you is this: what is something that most people don't know about you and you want them to know? What's something that you want to leave people that you feel is, with all the stories and all the priorities?
My life's an open book, unfortunately.
You're in the details. I mean, I wrote this down. Like, you talked about dynamite. You talked about, the details of how to blast. You talked about drudging. You talked about, the way you fly and hitting headwinds when you're on your way to Frank Sinatra. Right. You are thinking at a very large scale from an ambition perspective.
From vision, yeah.
As a vision. But you go into details. You know your business. You know about dynamite. You know about building. You know about materials. You know the details of development at a very intimate level. I don't know if a lot of developers know the details the way you do, Don.
Probably not.
Harley loves to say in our closings that we stand on the shoulders of giants. As young entrepreneurs ourselves, we look up to guys.
You guys are doing pretty good.
We're doing okay, but we're just getting started.
New York Stock Exchange.
Not bad.
Not bad, but you should know that without even knowing it, you've inspired a lot of people, including us.
I inspired a lot of people.
Yeah. And
I got a lot of people married too.
That's good. Well, that's a different type of inspiration. But David's right. I mean, we, so many of us Jewish entrepreneurs, we look up to people like you from afar. I've known who you were my entire life. When I was living in Boca, I knew exactly who you were and what you were doing, and it's a great honor for us to be able to spend time with you here today. Yeah. But you should know that you inspire the next generation of Jewish entrepreneurs to think bigger, to be more ambitious, to take big risks.
You've created jobs. You've given back to charity.
I know.
You've done a lot of good things for the world.
It's not like I'm going to go around and have a party for myself.
No, that's our job. Yeah. Our job is to...
We celebrate you.
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I don't believe in that. I don't believe in, blowing your own horn. That's nothing. The only person I'm really interested in influencing is my wife.
That's lovely.
I mean, look at that beautiful thing over there. Look at that. Now, who the hell wouldn't work their ass off to put a smile on her face?
And she hasn't stopped smiling for the last 90 minutes, so that's a pretty good sign. Hopefully, she thinks we did a decent job here. But I just want to say thank you for spending time with us.
Okay,
thank you for inspiring us.
We appreciate your humility and we appreciate your stories. Thank you so much.
Don, thank you for this. I know
Don,
you're a busy
great.
man.
Thank
very,
you.
very grateful. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Remember. You could mention my wife, but don't put her phone number in.
No problem. That's right. I won't. I promise.